I'm Bud Harvey, Hot Iron Blacksmith, and I want to demonstrate for you today the process of making a round punch. I'm following the outline instructions that Mark Asprey documented in his volume 1 book here, and we'll be using, I think it's on maybe page 76 or something like that. And so this is one of the first skill requirements for a national curriculum for level 1 blacksmithing. So I'll be using a 6.5 inch piece of 4140 tool steel that actually is a part of a oil well sucker rod that I was able to buy down in Oklahoma at a steel supply place. And that 6.5 inch piece, then the first part of our process will be making the hammer end, and the hammer end of this tool will be applicable to the round punch that we'll be making later, as well as a slot punch, as well as a chisel and a curved chisel, and other types of tools that are handheld like this that require an indexing on your handheld tool. So let's get started with progressing through that. We'll be warming up the 3/4 inch 4140 and then working over the anvil for that. Today I'll be using these tools to make the round punch. This is a rounding hammer that I've previously made. It's got a round dome on one end and relatively flat on the other side. And I use my favorite pair of tongs here for 3/4 inch diameter stock. This is called tongs from and they are available. These are my go-to heavy-duty tongs that I really like. You can see by the shininess that I will use these every day. My material then is a 6.5 inch piece of round 4140 sucker rod source, and then we go from there. Our first operation will be to make the hammer end of the tool, which is an 8-sided tapered piece to reduce the cross section of my original material, so my diameter here is smaller, and as I strike that with my hammer and using this tool, it gives me a smaller target to look at, more likely then to hit the center of my tool rather than off to one side. After we finish that portion, then we'll go and we will make the index, we call the indexing portion, where we can hold our fingers and our thumb to locate the position of our tool. In this case, it's going to be a round punch, so it's not as important, but it's still convenient to have a place to hold rather than to hold on to something that's round that may slip in your hands. So that will be our process that we'll be making today, to start with the hammer end portion of the round punch. That process that has completed the first operation for making the reduced size octagon shape end, and there's somewhat of a dish on the end of the hot piece, and we can tap that with a hammer, or we can take a hot rasp and rasp that off to make more of a dome top. So basically the forging portion is now completed on the piece I just demonstrated. Next step is then to forge then the hole for our finger gripping area here to hold that, to make that. That will be done primarily over the horn, and I'm using the other side, I'm using the rounding side of my hammer in order to create that. So the roundness of the hammer head is about the same as the roundness of the top of the horn. So as I strike from my hammer, my handle horn is striking back and creating the opposite shape of the body of my tool. Coming out of the forge at about 2,000-degree temperature. So I'm a nice bright orange color here. I'm going to strike it right down to make that dish in the cross section of my tool. So I'll establish the upper end first near the hammer octagon, and then I will slide my piece over the top of the horn slightly to continue that finger grip section. Looking for alignment, so I have a nice straight line down from my hammer blow in, down through my finger grip. I see some offset there. I'll try to correct that in the next sheet. Rather large 3-pound, maybe 3¼ pound rounding hammer. It gives me a lot of force to come down when I'm doing my hammer blows. And so normally I would not be forging with this heavy a hammer. My normal hammer is about 2½ pounds. But I do need to create this dish set in here and with the rounding hammer. And so this heavy hammer is working well for me, although it's not my normal blacksmithing hammer. My next step now is to work on the working end of my round punch. And I'm going to come back to my horn, and I'm going to use the flat side of my hammer, not the rounded side, and I'm going to create a 4-sided taper. Work that material up to about within about 1¼ inch of where I finished my finger grip area. Now I'm going to turn it on 90 degrees and repeat as we always do for making a taper. Come back. You might ask, why am I using the horn? I'm using the horn because of the radius of the horn here concentrates the force of my hammer blows against the bottom side of my forged piece, and therefore it increases the stretching and the movement and the forging of the piece that I'm working on. So it makes it easier. I can do the same on the flat of the handle, but the flat surface is larger, and so therefore it's not giving me as much force in forging movement as I would like if I use the roundness of the horn. finished round punch is going to be a 1/4 inch in diameter. So I brought the rough material down to a little larger than a 1/4 inch square. And I worked on the end primarily. I did some of the preliminary initial work in the first heat back here, but I mostly focused on finishing off the end of my square taper, and then I can progress and transfer the taper uniformly back to where my initial hammer marks finished off in the first heat. Notice as I strike this material, I'm working and with my hammer blows and drawing my material back under my hammer and blending in my high spots and low spots down to the finished end. So I'm using my hammer in the same position repeatedly, and my material then sliding under it as I come back, and that blends the transition and keeps me a relatively uniform, smooth surface without a lot of bumps and valleys and stuff in it. At this stage now, I reheated, and I'm coming back, going back onto the flat of the angle face, and I'm going to be working then to finish off the 4 sides and make sure that everything is transitioned back to about where my finger grip area was, so I have a long transition back to that area. I got a relatively uniform cross section on all 4 sides. The next step then, coming out of my next heat, will then be to translate or transform this into an octagon shape. And I'm going to take a peek on the end of my piece here, and if I look at it by eyeball, I'm saying that's more like a 5/16 inch cross section. So I think in my next heat I need to bring that down to about a 1/4 inch. And so I'll do a little bit of sizing adjustment on the next heat. And then after that, I'll go to the octagon. Come and make my adjustment in size. Working in is close to a 1/4 inch. I have a 1/4 inch hole here, so I guess this is a little bit larger yet. For a 1/4 inch, I need to bring this down slightly down to a 1/4 inch square. Get my eye calibrated for that, and then work it down at the next heat. polygon shape, working in my working end first, and then bring my hammer blows over the top of the corner. Slide my metal underneath my hammer then stays in the same location all the time. Bottom side of this is being struck by the anvil, and you'll notice that the amount of flattening and forging on the bottom is less than the amount is on the top. That's because the energy of my hammer is being absorbed by moving the metal through the cross section of the punch, and so it's using up the energy, and the residual energy that's left is what the anvil is able to do as a rebound. I'll locate the next corner and work from the tip back towards my indexing portion. Rotate to the next corner. And objective is to end up with 8 uniform facets. I do not hit the black end of your tool. Again, the metal is going to extremely object to that, and it might likely split. It's part of the physics as well as the metallurgy that will cause that to happen. So stay away from the black end of your tool for any hammer strikes. You can see, though, my efforts to try to achieve 8 uniform facets along the entire length of the taper, and how uniform those are and how you accept that as a matter of your own judgment. I see a couple there maybe could be improved a little bit, but basically I'm trying to establish a uniform round taper from the very tip back to basically where my finger grip transition begins. So I'm going to assume that the quality of that taper is acceptable, and then come back in the next heat and begin rounding up and smoothing off the sharp edges. At this point in my process, I'm being a little bit careful about my temperature. I do not want to overheat the end out here and create a grain growth in the metallurgy that will cause less strength and reduced toughness. So I'm trying to keep from overheating that and allowing the grain growth to develop. Therefore, I'm keeping it down around the 1800 degree range instead of up around the 2000. this out. There's a few high spots in there. Those can be removed with a farrier's file, and on the smooth side of the farrier's file, not the rough side. I prefer to hammer finish as much of my projects as possible with the hammer, and rather than to go to the grinder or to the file again and work it with that. It's a lot more efficient, time saving. You can smooth out your metal and get almost a finished project with your hammer. I do have a few high spots in there that you can see in the reflection, and any roughness like that when it comes to a punch is detrimental, and it creates more friction as you're trying to punch your hole, and therefore you'd like to smooth that out. So it's best to take a file and knock off any of the high ridges that might remain at your hand. I'm going to show you some of the heat treatment that we'll be using for this tool, the round punch, as well as the slot punch and the chisel. They all apply equally, and then I'll discuss at a later segment the details of heat treatment and what's going on. At this point, I just want to show you the process. The first step we're going to do is called annealing, and I have the punch in the fire. I'm bringing it up to a non-magnetic temperature, slightly above non-magnetic, and I'm going to test it to make sure that I'm at the right temperature. So my color, I can see my temperature on the main part is okay, but I see down at the tip it's definitely not very hot, and I can check that by a magnet, and so it's touching the magnet and it's holding on to the magnet. Back up here, it's not magnetic. So I need to slide this, the working end into the fire and bring it back up to that orangish color temperature. So now I think we should be okay. It's not touching, magnet's not attracting it, and so everything's okay. So now I'm up above what we call the critical temperature, and I need to allow this piece then to cool until it gets down to about 300 degrees. And I'm going to lay it next to the fire and let it cool slowly. If it were a higher alloy steel, I may even put it into an insulating media like vermiculite or ashes or lime and let it cool for 24 hours. But this is a 4140, a relatively mild steel, not particularly high carbon, and it can air cool, and it's going to achieve the properties of making all the microstructure of the steel more uniform and prepare it for the final heat treating and hardening process. So I'm just going to lay it off to the side. We'll come back in a bit and pick up at the next step.